This watch is one of the watches Maurice gave me, and it's an interesting one. It's a wristwatch branded Andre Bouchard, and I'd never heard of that before, but it's a Swiss-made watch, and it turns out that it's the store brand for a long closed department store chain called EJ Korvettes. And what's interesting about this one is that the dial is hidden behind this crystal that's very, very cloudy. And I don't know why it's like that. It feels like it's probably an acrylic crystal, but I'm not sure why it's all clouded up like that. I may have to replace that crystal if I can't clean it from the inside, because the outside is not what is cloudy. It's either the inside of the crystal or the crystal itself has gotten internally discolored within the plastic itself. So let's go ahead and take the back off this. Here's our movement for this thing. When I tried to pull the crown out, the movement holder popped up and popped out. So it's got this strange metal movement holder here. And I still need to get the stem out. So there's a screw that I'm going to have to unloosen to get the stem. And it is, I believe, that screw right there. So we're going to loosen that, and once I do that, the stem should pull out, and then we can drop the movement out and look at the inside of that crystal. Okay, I've got the stem out. Loosening that screw took it out. What was interesting was that when it got to the end, right before the stem was willing to pull out, I heard a loud snap inside, which I've never heard when taking one of these out like that before, so hopefully something wasn't damaged as I loosened that screw, but we'll see once we disassemble the movement. Here's the movement in the dial. The crystal is definitely going to have to be replaced. I tried cleaning the inside of it, and it's not having any effect on it. The plastic itself has become milky throughout it, and I'm not sure why. I don't know if maybe it could be polished with polywatch might take it off. I don't know. It's in pretty bad condition, though. The crystal is not just cloudy. It's also covered in a lot of really bad, deep scratches on the outside, so it may be better to just replace it. So I'm going to have to get my hands on a crystal lift before I can do that. So for right now, let's see if we can work on the movement, because I like this dial. This dial is just beautiful. I think it's a really nice looking dial. These weren't very expensive watches when they were new, but it still, I think, looks really nice. I think it would be fun to wear if I can get it working again. The watch actually does function. When you wind it up, it does tick, it does work, but it's running real slow and doesn't have much amplitude, so I think it just needs to be cleaned. I think everything looks nice on the back side of it where you can see the mechanism. All the jewels look like they're intact and everything. It doesn't really even look that dirty, but it probably has a lot of lubricants dried up in the jewels. Interestingly, this has a movement made by, it says the Hydepark Watch Company, and it's a Swiss-made 17 jewel movement. I'm going to need to do some research on this movement because I don't know much about it, but it looks pretty nicely made. So let's go ahead and take the hands off in the dial before we do anything else. To remove the hands, first we're going to stick a dial protector under the hands. If I can fit this under here. Actually, it will not. It looks like the hour hand is pushed down onto the dial where it's actually touching the dial. And that's not good. It needs to be bent up slightly so that it doesn't touch the actual dial, because it could scratch the dial as it moves. So I won't be able to slip a dial protector under that. It's too close to the dial. What I'm going to have to do is we'll use the protective plastic here. And that should protect the dial too. And when we slip our hand levers under here, the plastic will protect the dial and the hands. And it will also keep the hands from flying up in the air when they pop off, so that we won't lose them. So we slip the hand levers under there, pry upwards, and there they go. Pick up the hands carefully with the tweezers so I don't scratch the dial or the hands. Okay, now let's look at the dial and see how this comes off. It probably has dial screws on the edge of the movement somewhere. Oh, there they are. I think that may be, wow. That looks small. There's a teeny little screw there, and I think that's a dial screw. I don't know if I have a screwdriver small enough for that, so let's check and see if we do. I was able to get the dial screws out. There was 2 of them, and look how this dial is pried up in some places, and other places it nearly touches the movement. Someone's abused this poor thing in the past. Probably someone tried to remove the dial without taking the dial screws out and bent it by trying to pry it up with a screwdriver. Let's see if we can get it to come off now. It is on there kind of tight still. Oh, here we go. There's the dial side of the movement. Let's look at the back of the dial too. Back of the dial is reasonably clean. The dial for my grandpa's watch that I worked on was almost black with dirt on the back of it. You can see the 2 dial feet, then the front of the dial. It's got nice applied markers. I placed the movement into a movement holder with the dial side up because the first thing we need to do is remove the dial washer. This sits on top of the hour wheel and pushes it down. Basically, it uses the dial as mechanical pressure to hold it in place. And the dial washer sits on top of the hour wheel, and the hour wheel is on the cannon pinion. And the cannon pinion is held on to the center post by friction, and we're going to need to extract that. And I'm going to use a pen vise to do that because I don't have a cannon pinion puller. And a pen vise will work well for this. Henry Freed's book, Manual for Watch Repairers, recommends this method. And you basically put the pen vise over the cannon pinion post, tighten the pen vise over, and then pull it upwards, and it pulls right off then. Okay, I've got the pen vise tightened down over the cannon pinion, so we're just going to pull it back and give it a little turn. Make sure you pull straight up so you don't bend the thing. You don't want to bend the center post. There we go, now it's off the post. And here we can see the cannon pinion stuck in the pen vise. We might as well take off the rest of the keyless works and the motion works while we're here. What is left is this plate right here has a spring that comes off of it, which is for the detent for when you pull the stem in and out. When you pull it out, it snaps into place and holds. When you push it back in, it snaps into place. That little spring coming off this plate interacts with this lever here to provide that detent. That plate holds in place this wheel here, which is the minute wheel, and then under here are the levers that interact with the clutch to move it forward and backwards, so that it can either interact with the winding pinion to wind the watch, or with the wheels to turn the hands for setting the watch. And the intermediate wheel, I believe, is underneath here somewhere. We'll see that when we get this plate taken off. The winding pinion is in here, and that fell out a couple minutes ago when I turned the movement over, so that's not in place anymore. And then the clutch is underneath here as well. This is held in place by 2 little screws that we're going to take out now. I've removed the 2 screws that hold the plate and detent spring on. Let's go ahead and lift that off. And then we have the minute wheel here. Just lifts right off. And then this is the intermediate wheel. This interacts with the clutch to turn the other wheels to turn the hands when you're setting the time. And the clutch is down here. You can see it underneath these levers. This lever here is the clutch lever. This is the one that moves forward and backwards to move the clutch forward and backwards. When the clutch is in the back position, it puts it in winding mode because it touches the winding pinion, which is here. And then when you turn that, it turns the winding gears. And then when it's pushed forward, then it hits the intermediate wheel. And when you turn the stem, then it will wind, or will turn the wheels that turn the hands. I'm going to remove these off camera so I can look at them up close, because there's a spring underneath one of these that I don't want to have fly off into the air where I'm going to lose it. I've removed the clutch lever, which is the long lever that I pointed out that goes into the clutch. And there's the clutch right there. And I've removed the detent lever, which was the smaller lever here. And here's that spring I was talking about that I did not want to lose. This is the clutch lever spring. Now I'm going to try to remove the clutch here too with a pair of tweezers. And actually I might just be able to just drop it out. No, it won't fall out on its own. It looks like we might have to pull it out. Ah, there we go. Okay, well that's the entire keyless works removed. So we're going to flip the movement back over now to the other side so that we can remove the rest of the mechanism. Here's the back side of the movement now. Now this movement has an unusual design. Notice how the train bridge is up here, raised up above everything else, and we've got the center wheel and the third wheel are both raised up above the mainspring barrel and the ratchet wheel. That's an unusual design. There's also a little cap jewel here and I'm not sure what that's for. That may be for the escape wheel. And that's unusual to see something like that on the train bridge also. So we're going to have to take off the train bridge and see what's going on under there before I can get off the mainspring barrel and the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel and the click. One thing I did before I started on this was I released the tension in the mainspring barrel by pushing the click over with a screwdriver and holding one finger over the barrel and letting it slowly turn, because you don't want it to discharge real quickly because it can damage things, to discharge any spring tension left in the mainspring. This watch had actually, I wound it up when I first got it to see if it worked, and then I just let it wind all the way down. But even when a watch is wound all the way down where it's not running, there will still be a little bit of tension in the spring that you need to release, because it won't wind down completely where there's no tension at all. It'll basically stop running when the spring doesn't have enough power to run the escapement, but there may still be some tension left in the spring. So we did that. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the screws that hold the train bridge on and remove the train bridge and see what's underneath there. And I'm going to remove that little cap jewel that I've taken the screw out for. I've loosened the screws for the train bridge. There's one right here, and one right here. Something that's interesting is there's a screw hole right here that doesn't have a screw in it, and the other side of the movement has another hole like it right here. And these are cut into it where it looks like it's intruding into the area outside the movement. I wonder if these were for retaining screws used in pocket watch movements, like maybe this movement was used for a small pocket watch as well as for wristwatches. That would be interesting, because there's not a screw in either of those two, and they don't look like that they should have had a screw in them for a wristwatch movement because of the way that the hole is ground where it goes outside the movement area. So that'll be interesting. That's interesting to see that. The bridge has popped up a little bit when I removed one of the screws, and I can't get the other two screws out with my tweezers now without pushing it back down, and I don't want to do that for fear of damaging the spindles on top of the wheels if I push it down where it's not perfectly straight. So I'm just going to try to lift this off. See if we can get it out of there. Maybe there's a screw not loosened all the way. I finally got that last reluctant screw out, and here we got our center wheel. Be very careful not to bend that long spindle on that one. Here's our third wheel. You know what? I think there's another wheel underneath there, and I think that the one I pulled off wasn't the center wheel. That must have been the third wheel, and this other one is the fourth wheel. That's the center wheel. That's a very unusual movement design. I've never seen one like that before, and there's another bridge here holding that in place. This other long spindle that's sticking up here that went into that cap jewel, that is for the escape wheel. I can see that down there at the bottom. So let's get this other screw out of here and see if we can pop this off and get the center wheel out. I removed the screws holding that bridge in place. There was one here and one on the other side. There's also a bearing here for the center wheel that has a little tiny screw holding the bearing in place. I didn't take that screw out yet. I'm going to do that later because I want to take a look at this and see how it's put together before I take that apart. So I'm going to take this bridge off first. There we go. And the center wheel now will not come out until I take the ratchet wheel off. It looks like it's hidden under that. So let's go ahead and do that next. Here's our ratchet wheel. I need to take the click out too. There's a screw for that, and I need to get the ratchet wheel out, or not the ratchet wheel, the crown wheel off too. Let's get the center wheel first though. That's proving difficult to get out of there. I don't want to damage the spindle, and I don't want to pull it off by one side and bend something. There we go. Now I need to get the ratchet wheel off and the click, and then we can take off the barrel bridge. I've loosened the screw for the crown wheel. Now, a reminder on that, the crown wheel screws on most watches are left-handed screws, meaning that you turn them clockwise to loosen and counterclockwise to tighten, which is the opposite of the norm for a screw. And the reason I do that is because when you turn the crown to wind the watch, this turns counterclockwise, and it would loosen a normal screw. So that's why the screws are made so that you have to loosen them by turning it clockwise. And if you don't remember that, and you turn too tightly the wrong direction trying to loosen the screw, you'll strip out the threads on it. Okay, now the next thing I need to do is take out the click and the click spring. The click spring is this little tiny cane-shaped spring in there, and I got to be real careful not to lose that, because if that thing flies across the room, I'll never find it again. I'm going to do that off camera so that I can look at it real closely and keep it close to me while I'm doing it. I've loosened the 3 screws that hold the barrel bridge on. There's one here, one here, and one on the other end. And now the barrel bridge should just pop off. I'm going to use a screwdriver to pry that up, I think. Okay, there we go. And oh, the barrel came out with the bridge. That's not supposed to happen. The barrel's still stuck on the bridge there. Let's see if we can get that to come out. There we go. I pushed it out with a pair of tweezers. I'm not going to open the barrel because I want to make sure I can get a new mainspring for this before I do that. So we'll just go ahead and put that in the parts bin. The remaining parts of the movement that have to be disassembled are going to be a little more complex. This movement has an Incabloc style shock absorber, so I'm going to have to get that little teeny spring opened up to get the upper cap jewel out of there, and I need to do that before I take the balance cock off. And I can't take the escape wheel out, I don't think, without getting the balance cock off too, because I think the balance wheel is going to be in the way. Let's see if we can do that. I think it's not going to come though. Oh no, I got it. Okay. So yeah, we're gonna have I'm gonna have to figure out how to do that Incabloc spring. I've never done one of those before. And then once we do that, then I'll take off the balance cock, and then we'll have to flip the movement over. And there's a couple of cap jewels that are held on by screws on the bottom, and there's also another Incabloc spring on the bottom of the movement as well that has to be done. And those will be the last things we do. And I think I'm going to make that into a separate video because that's going to be a time-consuming one.